Our grand European adventure was to last nearly a month in the spring of 2007 and include 7 countries. As all big trips do, this one required much pre-planning. Jim and I were taking our 13-year-old granddaughter, Chelsea, along with us. While a cloudy day, we had lovely views of Seattle and Puget Sound from the air. We landed in London and took the train to Paris, where we rented a car for the majority of our travels. After a couple of days in London, we went to the Waterloo station to take the Eurostar to Paris. This high-speed train, Eurostar, travels at 190 miles per hour. It takes 20 minutes to travel through the tunnel under the English Channel, called the Channel, at speeds of about 100 miles per hour. This is our Paris hotel, the Grand Hotel de Turin. The Metropolitan is a subway entrance near our hotel. Is this a parking ticket? We just weren't used to outdoor toilets on the sidewalks. We were taking the metro to the Louvre, but started walking the wrong way along the Champs-Élysées. Retracing our steps took a long time since we'd walked for quite a distance. The land for these gardens was bought by Catherine de' Medici in 1563 to create an English-style garden. This is known as the Carousel Arch and celebrates the victories of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1805. The 4 horses on top were those found in Byzantium during the Crusades, and they dated back to the 2nd century AD. Napoleon ordered them removed from St. Mark's Basilica in Venice and installed on his arch. However, in 1815, the original horses were returned to St. Mark's and copies were placed on the arch here in Paris. The origin of the Louvre dates back to the 13th century when Philippe Auguste had a fortress built near the river for defense. In the 14th century, Charles V made it his royal residence. In 1546, the old palace was demolished and a new Renaissance palace was built. When the royal court was moved to Versailles in 1682, the Louvre fell into disrepair. From the beginning, it contained a collection of artworks. The number is about 400,000 today. Upon entering under the pyramid, we headed for the Dunant section, as we didn't want to miss the Mona Lisa. We all knew the painting was small, but it seemed unimpressive all the same. Leonardo da Vinci painted this portrait of Lisa Gherardini, wife of Francesco del Giocondo, between 1503 and 1506. Because all the information about the art in the Louvre was printed in French, we had to rely on later studies to find information about each piece. Museum visitors react in various ways to Dan Brown's interpretations of this painting in the Da Vinci Code. Most, however, do think the horizon line on the right side of the painting is higher than that on the left side. Does she really follow you with her eyes when you move around in front of her? Woman with a Pearl was painted by Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot about 1868 to 1870. Actually, the leaf on her forehead was mistaken for a pearl in the past. The model, Bertha Goldschmidt, is wearing one of the Italian dresses Corot brought back from his travels abroad. The Countess del Carpio, Marquesa de la Solana, was painted by Francisco de Goya y Lucientes in 1794 to 1795. The model was a well-read aristocrat and playwright who married the Count in 1775. This is a portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, painted by Raphael in 1514 to 1515. Castiglione was a friend of Raphael and author of The Courtier. Venus and the Three Graces presenting gifts to a young woman was painted by Alessandro Filippi di Botticelli in Florence in 1483 to 1485. It is a fresco from the Villa Lemmi belonging to the Tornabuoni family, allies of the Medici. The wedding feast at Cana was painted by Paolo Cagliari di Veronese in 1562 to 1563. This impressive painting took up one entire wall. The story behind the painting is that in Cana, Galilee, Christ is invited to a wedding feast during which he performs his first miracle. When the wine runs low at the feast, he turns water into wine. Jesus and Mary Magdalene are at the center, while the bride and groom sit on opposite sides of the table. Veronese depicts no less than 130 feast-goers, mixing biblical figures with men and women of the period. Several dogs, birds, a parakeet, and a cat frolic amidst the crowd. After covering the entire Dunon wing, we headed one floor down to the Sully wing to view the ancient Egyptian and Greek antiquities. We passed Roman gods, Hercules, and headed for Aphrodite, Venus de Milo. Aphrodite was originally sculpted in the late 2nd century BC. She was discovered in 1820 on the island of Melos, Milo in modern Greek, and is known as Venus de Milo. The arms were never found. This sculpture was a Roman imperial copy of a Greek original that was made in the 1st to the 2nd century AD. It was a gift from Pope Paul IV to the French King Henry II, and one of the first ancient statues to arrive in France. The goddess, Diana to the Romans, Artemis to the Greeks, was Apollo's twin sister. She was a tireless hunter whose arrows could punish the misdeeds of men. This statue of Apollo, the sun god, by Nicolas Cousteau from 1713 to 1714, illustrates Apollo chasing the nymph Daphne before she transformed herself into a laurel tree in order to escape him. It was installed in a grove in the Tuileries Gardens from 1798 to 1940. Across the Seine River from the Louvre, we saw the ominous Concierge, the famous prison which held political prisoners after the French Revolution. Tour buses are a great way to discover a new city as they take you to many points of interest, explain what you are seeing, and provide anecdotes and interesting viewpoints. This is one of the most interesting of the buildings that came from the Napoleonic era. It's the largest theater for lyric opera in the world. It can accommodate more than 2,000 people, and there's room on the stage for at least 450 performers. At least 12 streets come together in this roundabout. The Arc de Triomphe was begun in 1806 under Napoleon, who ordered it as a memorial to the Great Army. This bridge has a metal span 350 feet long and 130 feet wide. The tour bus's last stop of the day was at the Trocadero. While we could view the Eiffel Tower from here, we needed to take the metro across the Seine to get up close. At night, the tower transforms into an incredible light show. While the colored lights are on all evening, every 15 minutes or so there would be flashing lights that made the whole area sparkle and appear to be a fairyland. While we had a long wait to get to the top, the experience was something we'll remember all our lives.
Vale la pena.
This 700-year-old cathedral is Paris's most beloved church, complete with gargoyles and towers. Notre Dame means Our Lady, and the church is dedicated to Mary. Gothic architecture encouraged churches to be built very high with thin walls. This causes stress fractures to occur as the walls push outward. Notre Dame de Paris was among the first buildings in the world to use flying buttresses, shown here. This stopped the walls from collapsing and allowed for even higher ceilings. This severe and imposing building on the banks of the Seine dates from the end of the 13th to the beginning of the 14th centuries. Its name derives from concierge, the name of the royal governor who was in charge of the building. From the 16th century on, it has served as a state prison. After the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution, this building became the prison of political prisoners. Many spent their last hours of life awaiting Madame Guillotine here. Under the dreaded Fouquier Tinville, the public prosecutor, more than 2,700 people were sentenced to die in just 2 years. The most famous of these were Queen Marie Antoinette, unkindly called the Austrian woman, and Robespierre, himself a leader in the revolution. This is the Hall of the Guards, once the dining hall of the king. Meals were prepared here for 2,000 people in the king's service. Sometimes there would be as many as 1,000 guests. This was the women's courtyard in the prison. It was surrounded by cells, the comforts of which varied according to the financial resources of the prisoners themselves. This was the fountain where the women prisoners washed their clothes. It wouldn't have been easy to escape. Notice the sharp knives pointing down at the prisoners? This cathedral was the masterpiece of Gothic architecture, built in 1242 to 1248. It was designed to house the relics of Christ's Passion, especially the crown of thorns. Later, other religious relics were brought from Byzantium during the Crusades. Sainte-Chapelle truly had us enthralled. We had never seen so much stained glass before, and it was incredible. We imagined what it would be like to be here early in the morning when the sun had just risen, sending shimmering rays of light through all the colored glass. This has now become one of Chelsea's favorite sights on our trip, and mine as well. As Jim put it, the more you look, the more you see. Our next stop was the Musée d'Orsay, where we waited nearly an hour in the freezing rain just to get inside the museum. In London, as well as Paris, many bathrooms are for both men and women. Once you enter a room with a hand wash area, both men and women wait for an open stall. After 45 minutes in the queue at the D'Orsay, I needed to use the restroom. The line for the women's room was about 20 people, and we passed the men's room with no one in it. The woman behind me in line shrugged her shoulders and went into one of the men's closed cubicles. When she came out, and no men entered, another woman did the same thing. I took a deep breath and made the instantaneous decision to go in, finding my own cubicle in the men's room. I hurried, knowing I'd be very embarrassed if men came in and were waiting outside the door when I left. It didn't happen, though, so I quickly washed my hands and rejoined Chelsea and Jim, who were laughing at me. Immediately, we took a dessert break, even before touring the Impressionists. What an educational experience to see the original works of Degas, Cézanne, Renoir, Gauguin, Manet, Matisse, Monet, Toulouse-Lautrec, and Van Gogh, among many, many others. Along the highway, we saw interesting art structures. This is one of the world's best preserved medieval Gothic cathedrals. It was completed in 1223. The natural site itself has long been considered holy. It's believed to have been a place of Druid worship before the Christian era. 1.5 million people visit this cathedral every year. This Gothic cathedral was a landmark in architectural innovation, relying on columns, pointed arches, and flying buttresses rather than walls to carry the weight of this tall building. This allowed the architects to expand the building upwards to more than twice the height of earlier cathedrals, and it freed the walls to be filled with the famous stained glass windows. The cathedral's floor is inlaid with the labyrinth, a winding circular pathway that facilitates a walking meditation. For pilgrims, the labyrinth symbolized pilgrimage to Jerusalem, which was not feasible for most European Christians. It also symbolized the Christian's life journey and triumph over evil. Finally, we visited the palace and gardens at Versailles, which count among the most prestigious of the world's heritage sites and represent the finest and most accomplished achievement of 17th century French art. King Louis XIII's former hunting lodge was transformed and enlarged by his son Louis XIV, who installed his court and government in Versailles in 1692. From 1692 until the French Revolution in 1789, Versailles was in its period of maximum splendor, basking in the pomp and ceremony of a court forgetful of the difficult conditions of the country at large, but always ready for new luxuries, endless hunting parties, and magnificent banquets. The grandeur and the opulence in this palace was just overwhelming, especially when you started thinking about how poorly the peasants in the countryside were doing at this time. Tell that story.
This is a portrait of Marie Antoinette and her children. In the cradle there was originally painted a baby, but the baby died before the painting was finished, so it's painted out.
We're waiting for the Eurostar to whip us back through the Channel to London again. We've had a wonderful trip, but we're beginning to get very tired. Au revoir, France.